Hello, everyone. Here we are. Hi, Maarten.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for welcoming me.
Yeah, welcome to our next episode of Kontext Coffee Chat. Today, I will be talking to Maarten van Keulen. Is that right? Is that how I say your
right?
name?
Yes, very good. Impressive.
He is operations manager for This Side Up Coffee based in Amsterdam. Some of you might remember I have talked to Leonard, the founder of This Side Up, before, a couple of months ago. And we talked about the role and the importance of the coffee importer in the coffee value chain. And today, Maarten and I will be talking about the turmoil that has been hitting the global coffee market over the last, well, basically 18 months and everything that's going on, just to give you lovely people an update of what's happening on the coffee market. And I'm really glad, Maarten, you can join us and give us an overview of what's going on. What's happening?
A lot is happening, huh?
Yes, a lot is
Certainly not
happening.
a boring time.
Maybe if you want to just say a few words about who you are and how you came to do what you do for This Side Up.
So my name is Maarten. I've been working in the coffee industry since 2013. Originally started out as a barista in Oslo in Norway. I have education and development studies, so like why is there poverty in the world and what to do about it. And then when I was a barista, I understood like, hey, I'm actually working in an industry where there's a lot of poverty and a lot of things not going well. And that's when I decided to combine these things. And step by step, I rolled into the role of an importer, which is my current position. Been involved with this setup since 2015 and gradually more and more. And today my role is operations indeed, and I try to match like the vision of the company with the finances. Okay, so how do we simulate all the harvest, what's going on, projections, but the very practical things as well. So how can we practice what we preach, in short.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, so you're the perfect guy to talk to what I want to talk about today. Maybe we can just start off, walk us through what are the biggest challenges that you've seen over the last 18 months. I mean, so much has been going on in the world, obviously. The biggest thing being the global pandemic that has affected every link in the chain, starting at farm level with the coffee farmers. But region by region, there have been loads of other challenges as well. So maybe easiest to just go through the regions that you work in one by one, and if you can just give us a brief overview of some of the biggest challenges. Let's look at Southeast Asia first. So you are in Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia, and India in that area of the world. Is that right?
Correct. So it's where to start. There's so many things happening. Like the most obvious one is like the container prices are really going through the roof, and there are several theories of why that is the case. The most common one is to say, like, okay, the economy is now recovering faster than we could expect. There were containers at the wrong side of the world because of all the lockdowns. Now everyone wants to ship again, so prices go through the roof. So we've seen like rates going 8-fold of what it was last year, which is a very steep increase, and you really start to notice this in the coffee price. Zooming a bit more in Southeast Asia, Myanmar had a very bloody military coup, which was bad and still is very bad. So that affected a lot. Then we had like closings because of the pandemic, so people could not go to the mill. They could not work on their products. So it was like people sometimes were tied to their homes, and okay, so what do you do then? Coffee needs to be picked. Coffee needs to be milled. I think like we start now talking about Southeast Asia, but that's also where for us it started we started to realize that it happened there, and now slowly moved on to Africa and to South America with all the problems going with it.
But I mean, those aren't necessarily problems that are related to COVID alone. I mean, would you say COVID is something that compounds the issues in because, you know, obviously during a military coup, there are probably many days where it's a good idea to hunker down in your home and don't leave it, don't go to the fields and pick it. But if on top of that there's a pandemic raging through the country, and even without the coup you wouldn't be allowed out because of restrictions and stuff. So if we stick with that example for a second here, what did happen? Because the harvest season is over in Myanmar right now, but how did farmers manage during that time then?
In the beginning, it was extremely hard to get in touch. You know, like everything was closed off, all the internet connections were closed off. So it's like, what's going on? Thankfully, after a while, my colleague Leonard was in touch with them, and then we got sent these horrendous videos of what was going on in the street, people being shot. That was quite concerning. Then we were like, okay, guys, what do you want? What can we do? How can we support you guys? And then they basically said, like, okay, if you can just buy the coffee, and so we can focus on staying alive, which we found was a very fair call. You know, and let us worry about the finances. You just keep going. So that's what we did. And when that kind of settled down, like violence wise, then the mill closed because of too many COVID cases. And now recently we've heard like that our exporter went to lengths, just was so frustrated with the entire situation that he went downtown and bought a dry mill and started milling it himself. So it was a lot of frustration that led to empowerment, maybe, if I put it very positively, but it's still a very dire situation.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I mean, with all the grief and all the hardship, there are solutions, as you said. I mean, the solutions do rise out of that desperation, and then I suppose we will see once the coffees land. It'll be your challenge to move them on. How do you think that'll impact prices this year?
The biggest price increase is really the logistics. So that's where, okay, at some point we make a decision, you know, okay, this is the price we're going to charge our clients, and if it's going to be a bit more than we swallow, if it's going to really go eightfold, then we have to talk to everyone again, like, hey, this is happening, and it's going to be expensive. Thankfully, which is not super happy about, but we're not alone. This is a worldwide thing, so the prices will go up everywhere. So you see like that the cheapest coffees from Brazil are also going up in price, not only because of logistics, but you see it happening everywhere. So one of the things is really clear now: if you have good direct relationships with your farmers and your clients, this is what really matters. You know, like, hey guys, do you understand what's going on? How shall we do this? You know, do you want to, is it okay if we charge more, or do you want to cancel the order, or what shall we do? And the last thing, like, cancellation never happens when people know each other. You know, when you, for example, know the farmers in Myanmar, you've worked with them for year after year, you're not just going to drop them because it was a military coup and the logistical prices went up, you know. So I think that's really the strength of transparent coffee and like these direct connections.
Yeah, and doing business with a solid foundation of values, right? Not just value in matter, but value in ethics as well.
Absolutely, and it's really like, we often say as the setup, okay, we sell relationships and you get the coffee for free. And in this
Okay, I'll
situation,
get back to you on that. Next time I get your invoice.
we will change the wording. Yeah, but it's especially in a year like this really is proven to be true.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so yeah, I mean, Myanmar obviously is one of the absolute hardest hit origins at the moment because of the political situation, plus the pandemic, and then um, the logistical issues surrounding containers. Is that something that is particularly bad in Asia, or as you said, did it start there and then just sort of move along to other areas as well, or?
Yeah. So first we hoped and we thought it was only like an East Asian thing, but it's not. Prices have gone up. The last few weeks I've been working hard to get our Brazilian coffees exported, and it's bad. I've talked to many people, and it's difficult to really find out what's actually happening. What I've heard is that, for example, the African lines, so it's like the shipping lines from Africa, they're being kind of rerouted through Asia to kind of, because there's more money to make there. So you have less shipping lines in Africa. And because of the rates that the shipping companies can get in Asia, you see that the rates go up everywhere. Because it's like, why would they sail to an origin that pays a fifth of what they could get somewhere else? So you see it going up everywhere. And then you see situations of people bidding, and then the last few weeks, and it never happened. Normally, it's like when you book a container, so like when you reserve it, then you just get it. You know, it's just kind of a formality. And now we had over 12 cancellations on the container bookings.
Wow.
So it's difficult to get a grip, and the coffee is ready. And after a year of Corona, and the farmers are so happy that they managed to get a solid quality and get it exported, then it doesn't get exported. You know, that's frustrating.
So it just sits in the port then if you can't load it onto containers.
Correct. And you see, like in East Africa, that the ports, because of the pandemic situation, didn't have enough staff. So then you see that sometimes the container misses the boat, or these very weird situations. So this, even though we're getting out of this global pandemic, it's when we're not even close to being finished with all the consequences.
Yeah. So the chaos prevails and just keeps shifting around
Yeah, and,
depending.
and I think like in this chaos, there are parties that are making a lot of money. That's basically just how it works, and that's a dire situation. But yeah,
But do you
positive. Sorry.
go on? Go
And I
on.
said the positive thing about it is that also like low quality bulk coffees are going up in price.
Mhm.
So and percentage wise, so like comparative to their prices, the shipping price is quite a lot. So you see that also for us in specialty, the price goes up, but it's relatively not as much. So you see that specialty and commodity are getting closer, which I find a very positive thing.
For specialty coffee.
Yes, because I think, like as we all know in the industry, once you serve people specialty coffee and it's not that much more expensive, they won't go back to commodity. Uh,
But then, I mean, the reasons for the prices of commodity coffee going up, I think we'll get to in a bit.
yeah.
But um, do you think this is going to be a temporary thing then? The price gap getting smaller and closing, or what do you think will happen if maybe things go back? What's your prediction there?
Honestly, I think in a lot of situations it will stay like this. When I talk to farmers and exporters, what I hear is like, okay, it's the market correction that was long needed.
Okay.
Prices were too low. What I also see is that because of several reasons, because of droughts and frost, for example, in Brazil, like some farmers won't replant their coffee fields, their damaged coffee fields with coffee, because other commodity prices like soy are also going well. So why would you replant new coffee, wait 5 years if you can just do soy as well? So there's also the climatic impacts also plays a role. So we have a pandemic, we have a logistical situation, we have a climatic situation going on, and I think these all together will make that the prices won't go back to what they were.
Okay. Let's hope, right? Let's hope.
I think it
Because
would
yeah,
be good.
as you said, it's a correction in the market
Yeah,
that has been long decades overdue. Um,
absolutely, and it's even like the correction we see right now. It's a lot more than last year, but it's still not. For some countries, it's really not even close to cost of production. So it's like we still have a
a
road to
way
go.
to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think we'll, as I said, we'll get back to this bit in a little bit. Maybe we're skipping a couple of levels in that conversation where it might be hard for people to follow what we're actually talking about. Why is it good if prices go up, right? I mean, maybe we have to explain that a little bit, but let's go back to Southeast Asia for a minute. We've talked about Myanmar. Are there any other issues in that region? Thailand, Indonesia, India, are they struggling with anything in particular? Obviously, India, for example, has had massive issues at a late stage in the game, particularly with COVID and the new variant. Do you know how that has impacted your farming partners in India?
Well, it's not been good, and especially like export season was difficult. Personally, we've been in touch, and we know they're doing well, so that's always good on a personal level. But it's been a mess, and I find this one a hard one to predict. You know, like how's it gonna affect the harvest, and what's it gonna do? So that's India. I find a difficult one to answer. Indonesia, we've seen on some islands like there is a heavy drought, and I feel like with our focus on so much on logistical problems and pandemic, these climatic things are getting a bit the backseat, and I think if we keep them on the backseat, we're gonna have a problem in a few years. So it's good to keep that also in mind that that's still happening. We still need to do climate adaptation. We still need to focus on the ecological measures on farm level to make them resilient for the future. And yeah, it's quite amazing like how much focus goes to other things now. You know, like let's try to get it also, and you see it now like in Asia and in Indonesia that this is happening. Yeah.
Walk us through the impact of this drought in Indonesia. Is that something that's current, or is that something they've struggled with in the past as well?
But what I've heard now of our partners is that it is a kind of a peak drought, so it's a bit unexpected. Rain seasons are changing. I don't know what the effect is going to be. It's fairly recent. We've seen also droughts in Congo and Rwanda and in Brazil. So which like okay, this it's a global thing.
Yeah.
So
Do you have a rough idea of how, I mean, if we actually go back to the coffee plant, how does that affect the plant itself? Because in some of the coffee growing regions, lack of water has always been an issue to some extent, right? Which is why in some regions they can only do naturally processed coffees because they don't have enough access to water to produce washed coffees and things like that. But how, like particularly, how do these types of droughts impact the plants?
it's more like, to my understanding, I'm not an agronomist, but to my understanding, it's really like the timing of when the rainfall comes, that's getting out of balance. So where farmers usually would always know, like, okay, so in this week it will rain, and that's good for the blossoming, or that's good for, or it's actually bad because we're harvesting, so we don't want rain, or we're drying, we don't want rain. That these time schedules are getting out of balance, and that affects coffee quality, that affects like coffee yield, and when the yield is low and the quality is low, as a farmer you have a problem. And what do we do as an industry then? You know, like then you just say to the farmer, oh, I'm sorry, you only had half a crop, so we only pay you for half of what you have. You know, it's so the financial impact still is at the farm level, which we as a company we're thinking about. Okay, how can we as a value chain look at these risks, which is not an easy one to answer.
Yeah, yeah, especially because the solution isn't in your hands alone, right? Because I mean, if you only buy half of what you've bought last year from one particular farmer or cooperative, then that means you have less to sell.
Yeah.
You might still, buy it at similar price levels, but potentially you could probably, if you weren't the type of company that you are, you could probably ask horrendous prices for that coffee because more people will ask for it, right?
Yeah, and I think you've summed up very well what's happening at the sea price right now. It's like if you're transparent as we are, where the cost of production, like in this situation, like our prices will go up because we need to cover for the basic needs of some farmer, but that doesn't go up ballistically, but it's very interesting to see, like, okay, are these droughts going to happen more? It's kind of my hobby to read all these climate reports, and in some regions, especially Indonesia, some islands there, it's not really looking well for the future. Maybe sidestepping a bit here, but we are now focusing more and more on projects like, okay, so how can you make your farm resilient? What are the systems you can implement? So how can you have different crops on your farm so that you're not only dependent on coffee, but for example also on pepper or durian? That's a project we're doing on Flores. What you also see is, like, when you have a more resilient forest system, that both droughts and colds are becoming less extreme because it functions kind of as a cushion. And changing of varieties. So if you say, like, okay, my Typica is not working anymore, or my bourbon doesn't work anymore here, you need to replace now. It's only in 5-6 years that you are back at the yield you have today.
Yeah. And when you do projects like that, as you said, you are not an agroforestry specialist. Do you work with specialist organization at Origin then to implement these projects, or?
Yeah, we work with a broad spectrum of partners, and it's really amazing to work with so many specialists, and it's amazing for us as a company to be there and learn as well, and do these courses ourselves with them. But these kind of agronomical knowledge, you need a specialist. We only facilitate, and we are kind of a matchmaker between coffee farmer and coffee roaster, but also coffee farmer and agronomist or financial aid or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. In the case of Indonesia, let me ask you then, because we have one coffee from you from Indonesia in the range right now, the Indonesia Enrikang Parangan. And the process for that one you have called unclean washed. And I do get questions from my customers. What does that mean? Like, unclean washed? Ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that a result of the climate issues people are facing? Or tell us a bit more about what does that mean, unclean washed coffee?
It's I think, like, we should call it differently. This is our exporter came up with this one, and we're like, should we do this? We've called it the special honey process before, which I think sounds a bit more appealing. It's basically, if I remember correctly, they pick the cherries, put them in the bag, let it ferment in the bag. So you have like half fermentation going on, and then getting it out, putting it on the drying tables and drying it as a honey, and then washing it after a few days. So you have like a lot of different processes happening at the same time. So it's fermented, it's a honey, and it's a washed. So what do we call this? Yeah.
It's a bit sticky because of the fermentation and all that. And until it gets washed, I guess the appearance might be unclean.
I guess so. I think, like, the word captures exactly what it is, but it's not a very salesy word. Yeah.
But is that a result of lack of water, or what made them come up with the idea of fermenting it in a bag? Because there is water in the bag as well, I suppose. It's just not a whole tank of water.
It's
as
actually
the
not. They
juice?
don't add water to it. It's really like
Okay, just in the
off
bag.
the cherries themselves. I think like in many origins, we would advise people like, okay, would you like to go for a natural? What you see is like having a natural or this process you described is it's not easy, you know, like proper drying of a cherry in a tropical climate, you need to know what you're doing. So it's kind of level 6 in coffee farming. And especially at specialty coffee levels. So yes, it has to do with reduction of water, and we would advise it, but we wouldn't advise it to just any farmer. It requires some basic knowledge.
Why though? What are the risks to people who have no idea about coffee processing and don't even really know what natural means or
Okay,
what wash means? Or
sure. No.
what are the risks?
Fairly straightforward. So like when you pick a coffee cherry, you have a few things you can do. So you either just pick it and you put it on the drying table, and then you let it dry as a raisin, and then like the fruit juices of the cherry go into the bean. That's what we call natural. The other extreme is that you pick it and you put it in what's called a wet mill. So then there is like this kind of machine with water, and it takes away the pulp from the coffee bean. So there are two coffee beans in the cherry. And then it ends up in a tank, and then you wash off what's called the mucilage. So the slimy thing, you wash it off. That's what's called a wash coffee. If you do this process, but you don't wash off the mucilage, you have a honey. So those are the three basic ones. The tricky one with both a honey and a natural is that you need to turn them around quite a lot, otherwise to dry evenly on all sides. So that's one thing. But if you don't do this thoroughly, it might start to be moldy on parts of the cherry. And then when you have mold in your coffee, yeah, that's called like an official proper defect, and then you cannot sell it anymore for a good price.
Yeah.
So it's a
And
risk.
it's all about fermentation in both processes, right?
Yes.
So if you dry it, but you don't do it right, you don't pay the attention to turn it and to layer it, at a certain height, flat rather than in a
Yeah.
huge bowl. The fermentation process is just going wild and rampant, essentially.
Exactly, and it's unequal, so you get like stranger fermentations in one corner than the other. You need fairly proper drying beds for this. You need to have like an installation. So as a farmer, you need to do some investments before. As a roaster or an importer, in our case, we cannot just say like, hey, can you do naturals? Like that there is some education needed for this.
Yeah. Then at first sight, that seems counterintuitive because you would think you need less equipment to implement natural coffees, because essentially you just harvest the cherries, put them out on raised beds or on concrete patios to dry in the sun, and that's it essentially. But as you said, the process is wilder in terms of the fermentation, and so you need to be able to control it more closely.
Yeah, I think the issue then what you get is uniformity. So let's say I have a cooperative with 20 farmers, and everyone is doing their own naturals at their own backyard. If they don't have the proper same education, it might change very, very differently. And this might be something that you want. You might want to have single farmer lots where you have 2 bags of every farmer, and 2 go to you and 2 go to someone else. The big advantage with washed in this sense is that you have a big mill, so people bring the cherries to the mill and then it gets uniformly processed, so you get like bigger quantities of uniform quality. And you could do this on bigger scale as well for natural, but in practice this is not much happening. So you would say like, okay, we have like a central drying facility, and this you see more and more happening now, that big washing stations, let's say in Africa, starting to have like big natural drying facilitations next to it.
All right. All right. I mean, obviously, this is, techniques and super interesting. But I think the takeaway in the context of Indonesia is that the drought has impacted the harvest, And it does make a difference in terms of the options that farmers have in processing their coffees. Because if they don't have access to water, they don't even have the choice. They have to go for non-water involved practices, and they do pose their own challenges, essentially. And timing is very important in those instances. Yeah.
Absolutely, the timing is crucial, but also like this issue that you described with the drought, it's super local as well. You know, like not every island in Indonesia is facing the same problem. So it's for us also like, okay, we are trying to help them with all these teachings and all this like technicalities of drying coffee. That's fairly straightforward. But how do you get your plantation climate resilient? That's super local. So that's we try to develop a blueprint right now, so that with basic techniques and basic things, so that they could apply to every individual situation.
And that's something that farmers ask for as well.
Yes, in that sense, it's like when you, for example, give a class, like one of our NGOs gives a class on agroforestry practices. You need to go into the details of the local varieties, of the local produce, of the local climate. Is your hill facing north or south? What do you plant? Do you do beans or bananas or avocados? What is it you do? It's super local. So even though if you have like a very clear booklet on what the basic premises are, you need to go local.
Yeah. Okay. I realized that we could probably just hone in on an individual origin and talk about it for hours. But let's get back to the slightly more global perspective and move on to the next region that you're active in then. So we talked about Southeast Asia. How about Africa? You've already said that the logistical issues are similar there. First of all, the countries you operate in Africa are almost all of them. So Rwanda, Tanzania, Congo, Uganda, Kenya, and Ethiopia. And obviously there will be localized issues that have affected coffee farmers in the last year. Ethiopia, for example, had political unrest as well, which I imagine, even though not in the classic coffee growing regions as much, but I would imagine still that the country in uproar will impact people in their day-to-day lives as well, or at least also logistics with transporting the coffee ready for export through the country and things like that. No?
Yeah, correct. Like in the case of Ethiopia, we needed to be quick. We wanted to export just before the elections. This was an advice we had from our exporter. You know, like it gets a bit messy around election times, so let's export before. So that's then you just have to hurry up. You know, like that's thankfully the only issue we had regarding that particular case. If we look more broadly on what's happening in East Africa, like compared, for example, to Brazil, the mills in East Africa work with a lot of hand pickers. So a lot of people that do the hand sorting of the coffees, and they sit next to each other. So normally you would have like a hall of 50 people hand sorting the specialty coffee. But then with the pandemic regulations, you could maybe only have 15 people. So the delays we had in this case in Uganda were huge. Only because instead of 50, you have 15 people doing something. And they were not even talking about like, okay, when the lockdowns really tightened, that these people were not allowed to get to the mill. So then the mill had to close. And then you have coffee that's ready on the cherry. Maybe it's even ready in the mill, and then you just have to wait. So where we would expect our Ugandan coffee, like in the spring, it's now coming in next week.
And again, the question from the roaster perspective: do you already know how that will impact flavors and coffee quality? Coffee just sitting around in any place is very rarely a good thing, right?
It is. That's true. I'm just trying to find the best time. It wasn't too bad. It's like it's never good, but it wasn't too bad because the coffee was stored in grain pros closed off. So even though when the people could not go to the mill, it was stored the same way as we would store it here in Rotterdam. So I like technicalities, like they say, and I don't know if this is proven, but that storing in parchment is actually quite good for coffee, for to keep its freshness. So that was quite good in that sense. But the other problem is like with these huge delays is that people that count on these coffees, for example, because they have a hotel chain that works with this particular coffee of this particular cooperative, and it comes 6 months later, they might really run into issues, which is extremely frustrating because like establishing a relationship between a coffee farmer and a coffee roaster takes time, and once it's there, it probably stays forever, we hope, but we've seen that this is the case. And then when you have a situation of delay and people need to fill it up with something else, you start to kind of wiggle on that solid relationship, and then it gets a bit tricky.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just you must have had moments in these last 18 months where you must have felt so overwhelmed with the sheer amount of different small fires to tackle all over the place, no?
Yeah, it's every week it's something different. It's like
Yeah,
no day is the same, that's for sure.
yeah.
And then it is a challenge to keep on top of it all. But we're super blessed to be with so many very, very good partners in all the countries we work with. So that we have really short connections to them, and can really like get a good feeling what's going on the floor, on the ground level, very quickly. So that helps a lot.
I mean, with all the different issues, because same as with Asia and other regions, in Africa, we had COVID, we had the restrictions that came along with that. We had political issues in several different countries, but also droughts and, as you said, climatic issues, especially in countries like Ethiopia, that will affect the way coffee farmers operate and the harvest is being managed, and coffee can move from farm level to port level for export and everything like that. But there are also good news, aren't there? Because I just saw Sakami Coffee joining in to listen to the conversation. So let's have a good news example of what's happened over the last 18 months in Africa for you.
Good. So, well, talking about Sakami, is the newest member to the family. Extremely happy to work with them. It was a very nice way. So we started a new origin in a time where basically all the news on TV was very bad, where it's all like the very sad news. And then we said, hey guys, we're doing something really cool. We're starting a new origin, and we want you guys to be on board. And for the first time in our history, we did kind of crowdfunding campaign, for the simple reason that we didn't have enough cash flow to just purchase another container. But we wanted to do this, so we were like, okay, let's see who of our roaster friends is willing, based on samples, of course, is willing to maybe pitch in for a bag or two. And it became a huge success, and super amazing kickstart of a new origin, of very good coffee, and very well received, and just a little bit of happy news in so many difficult things. Yeah.
What's different about Sakami, though? They are based in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
And why is it special for you to crowdfund a direct buy from a farm in Kenya?
Normally, it's like when we start a new origin, it's like, okay, we start a little bit out with a few bags, and then we take a bit of a risk. Yeah? We buy, let's say, 50 bags, and we try to get it to the man, and to have some roasters excited. And here we kind of turn it around to say like, hey guys, do you want to share this burden with us, and let's do it as a community. And to our own surprise, that became a huge success. So it's really like, I don't know how to describe it. Maybe this specialty coffee community actually really exists, and people are closer than we would picture them, and it was super heartwarming. And I think also for Sakami, but they might answer this better for themselves. It was very nice to be received in this way by for them a new buyer.
Yeah, great. That is nice to have a positive example
Yeah.
as well. But also, am I right in thinking that the direct trade model isn't necessarily the standard in Kenya, because they have some sort of a government led auctioning system usually, isn't it?
That's
Where you
correct.
buy through a marketplace, and then the transparency isn't always as easy.
No, that's correct. And it's also it, it's known as one of the more difficult country where it's difficult to have like reliable partners. And we were very grateful to do this together with one of our roaster friends from Steens Beans. He's based in Amsterdam, but he's a born Kenyan. So that was for us felt very nice. And in addition to that, like the people from Sakami, I had met personally in Kenya, and my colleague Leonard has met personally as well a few years before. So basically, the stars were all aligned, and Steve knew Sakami as well. So like, okay, we all three know them, and we have a good feeling about them. I think we should go forward with this. So I think with everything, with every country, it's like, okay, how do you find a good, reliable partner?
Yeah.
That's where it starts, and we were very fortunate to have this. Yeah.
So let's hope this is the beginning of a beautiful love story then.
Sounds like it.
A positive beacon in hard times as well.
Absolutely.
All right, and then last but not least, South America. You are operating in Central and South America, in Colombia, Brazil, Peru, and Nicaragua. Am I forgetting one?
No,
Yeah.
sounds like you did more. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I know that COVID is as much of an issue there is and was as it is everywhere else. And I imagine the logistical issues related to that are similar as well. But I also know that in some countries more than in others. What are your news, or how have you been operating there throughout the last year and a half?
Personally, I've spent quite some time in Brazil last year. And that was a good year to do this. This year's harvest, they had a 40% lesser harvest than the year before because of a drought. And at the end of the harvest season, they were faced with 3 frost waves. So it's like, for your comparison, like 40% less crop in Brazil means the entire production of Colombia. So for global market perspective, it's huge how much coffee there was not being produced, and then you get like 3 frost waves in a region that never gets like below zero situations, and coffee cannot stand frost for more than a day and a half, 2 days, then it dies.
This year, right? So the drought issues were last year affecting this year's harvest.
Correct.
And then when was it? In June, July, right?
Correct. So in what's called the post-harvesting, so when they were like processing like the drought coffee, so to say.
Of the already diminished harvest, yeah.
Yeah. So what you then get is a very interesting situation, because you get a frost which affects only next year's crop, starts to affect the prices of this year's crop because of a global panic. And in this situation, we're very, very fortunate to be working with partners year after year after year. And then what you see is like, okay, if you pay a good price in the bad years, it doesn't go ballistically up price-wise in the years when the world prices are very high. So we still pay fairly decent prices, which we're very fortunate with.
Yeah, I saw your newsletter from last week, and I hadn't really put 2 and 2 together there, because you actually said that usually in the specialty coffee sector, we sort of pride ourselves in paying prices to the farmers that are way above world market level, because traditionally, very, very unfortunately, world market levels are just so miserably low that it's almost unethical not to pay more for better quality. But now, since because of the reasons you just named, and mainly because of the harvest situation in Brazil, the prices have gone up so drastically that the gap is closing between commodity grade coffee and specialty grade coffee.
Correct.
So then, yeah, I mean, I would think, within the market logic, usually you would assume that farmers would have to be tempted to just sell off their coffee to the highest bidder.
That is indeed the case, and it's like, as our one of our farmer and exporters in Brazil said, it's like the world market price, it really thrives on instability. So when people panic, prices go up, and in these panic price difference, people make a lot of money. So this where he said like this drought and this frost we saw coming for months. So if the global price was connected to an agricultural reality, it would just have gone steadily up. But not as this panic just went like through the roof, and then maybe next year it goes down again and then it goes up again. Like this is just an instrument that how the coffee world of commodity world works, and we're very happy that we have little to do with this. And I often use the metaphor of a plumber. So let's say like you have a problem in your kitchen and you're going to call a plumber. So the first time you will look on Google and you find a good plumber for a good price. But once you found one and the guy or the girl comes over and fixes your problem, the next time you will call him again or her again. And this is exactly what happens if you have good relationships with your coffee farmers. Like we come year after year after year. We give them good prices year after year after year and help them with all their issues. They don't feel tempted to call someone else. Why would you? You were happy with us all the years. So I think this is the strongest part of it is specialty, but mainly relationship based coffee, where when everything is transparent and you work as equal partnerships and not just a blind buyer.
Yeah. I mean, that is something that in my previous conversation with the guys from Lado a Lado, also a Brazilian-based coffee exporter, that's exactly what they said as well. So now in these times where things are crazy, even crazier than normal, those relationships really show their true value for everyone involved, right? Because we won't just sort of, farmers now won't just skip to other buyers who might offer them a little bit more this year because of the particular circumstances, but they will stick with the partners they know and trust, and where they know they will come back next year, even if the prices fall again, and still stick with the solid prices they've paid every year.
Correct, but don't get me wrong. Like prices will increase a bit, but that's more as a reaction to because fertilizer prices go up because of currency problem or whatever kind of things, like. But that's more like directly talking to the farmers. Like, okay, are you still making the same margins as last year? Should we increase the prices because your cost went up? These kind of conversations are uncomparable with what's happening with these panic peaks and people just ditching what they call like defaulting contracts. So when we have a contract to say like, okay, we're going to buy 100 bags of you, and there comes a drought, and you might actually still produce 100 bags, but then you say like, oh, I actually produced 60 because of the drought, but the other 40 you sell secretly to someone else. That kind of dynamics you create if you have such a anonymous system where people have been underpaid year after year after year. Um, and I think our approach, at least the approach we try to accomplish, is like really sitting with the farmer and is this enough? You know, is the price we pay you, can you do whatever you want to do with it? Can not just survive, not just not die, but can you actually run a business of this?
Yeah.
And the first years when we do this, people are a bit like amazed, you know, like, is this a joke? You know, which is very sad that people think this. And then after a few years, you see that the trust comes because we actually mean it. And thankfully, it works very contagious. So more and more people are doing this.
Good. So this is, I mean, this is Brazil. We've talked about, that's the big one.
Yeah.
Because fluctuations in the harvest in Brazil have such a huge impact on the global market because Brazil is the biggest exporter of coffee in the world. How about the other places? How about Colombia, Peru, Nicaragua?
Colombia also had quite a peak in prices, which for us was quite interesting because we work with quite a lot of individual farmers there in the southern part of Colombia, and where I hear from other parties that the prices really go up crazy, you know, like that farmers that don't have very good relationships start to like, okay, I can get $1.50 more, starting to push this and maybe also threaten some of their clients, like, okay, if you don't pay more, if you don't pay $1.50 more, then I will sell it somewhere else. In our situation, you see, like after year working with the same parties, we have a conversation about this, but also it very quickly goes to like, what do you think? You know, will the farmers sell somewhere else? It's like, why would you? You know, would you really abandon this relationship, or would you push it up? But then if they say like, okay, our local currency is not comparable to the American dollar anymore, which contracts are being paid in, that's a total different scenario. But those things happen as well. But that's
trust and transparency help to
and equal partnership, because it's also like if you just think one step further, if you pretend that an importer doesn't exist, the farmer has a relationship with the roaster like you. If the price goes up with $1 for a pound, that's quite a lot when you pay like in your case like British pounds per kilogram. That's quite a steep increase. And let's say you have fixed contracts with a hotel chain for that particular coffee, you might lose. So you might stop with them. So you might go to a different farmer. So it's a tricky game. And the only answer, at least in our perspective, is like when you talk as equal partners and say, okay, your coffee we sell together to this party. And if you have price increases, how do we take this on as a value chain? Can we maybe ask the hotel, explain the situation to the hotel chain? Maybe if they chip in like whatever, 50 cents more, it already covers it. It's so much stronger if you look at it from a value chain perspective, and you get very resilient for these very crazy fluctuations.
Is that the sort of conversations going on that you see already? Because I kind of feel like the head of this wave is just now starting to sort of reach the consuming countries, right? I mean, so far all of this has been happening at origin and in the logistics department of that value chain, but these price effects are coming with these new harvests, are now coming to origins. Do you know, have you seen your customers or roasters having to have these conversations with their customers, and how did that go?
Yes, I've seen this a lot, and surprisingly, it's gone very well. It's what we really try to preach is price transparency. like also as a roaster, just you don't have to be shy that you make a margin, like a coffee roaster, like the machine that's not free. Your hours are not for free. And what we see is like that the roasters that have this approach and just show what they make and are very open for this and say like, okay, so my purchasing price went up with $1, so my sales price is going up with $1. People find it very fair. It's this complete openness creates a lot of trust, also to the end client, because like people on the news see as well that logistics is going crazy. People know that there were gonna come effects because of Corona. It's obvious, but we need to make, as a value chain, we need to make that translation. What is it that it actually means?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that would have been my next and or last question from your perspective. Then, if you give an outlook of how all of these issues that we've briefly sort of talked about now, how will the end consumer actually notice that in their cup and in their wallet?
What I expect and what I also hope, finally, is that supermarket coffee prices are going up, because it's like also the very, very big change. They are probably running out of their stock at some point, so they will have to buy for these higher prices. And they don't have very good relationships with their farmers, so those farmers might default on the contracts to sell to people that offer. So they are at risk for farmers that just pretend that they didn't have the coffee. They are also equally at risk for big logistic prices as we are. But if your margins are so, as in like your costs, which you actually have allocated to the farmer, are so tight, it gets very messy very quickly. So I expect that supermarket coffee prices will go up, and specialty coffee prices only a little bit. So we're getting closer to each other, which then I hope that people are going to go more local, which I also see as a result of the pandemic. With all the lockdowns, people were going around town. Well, what's happening here, going for a coffee to go? So they already, I think, as a result of the pandemic, know their local roasters. And then if the prices also get closer to each other, I'm very looking with a solid smile to the future that people might hop over to specialty and more transparent coffee for better prices.
Good, good. That's a nice note to end on, in my opinion. So obviously, I can only agree. I think paying higher prices in the supermarket is something that has been overdue again for decades.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously, customers won't always love it, but it's just a more realistic reflection of what's actually happening in the market, isn't it? And especially on the farm level end of the value chain. So yes, prepare to pay a bit more for coffee, but also rest assured that if you have to pay a bit more for coffee anyways, there is coffee out there that also tastes a lot better for that higher price.
And coffee that is prepared to take on the future. Like if you pay more for the coffee, it means that the farmer had actually the opportunity to invest and to make it climate resilient, to take these hits of droughts and frost and all these kind of things. That's really worth some money if you want to keep on drinking coffee for the next 20 years.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know if there are any questions out there. Is anyone interested in asking us about this topic of turmoil and challenges on the global coffee market? If there's nothing, then I say big thank you. This was a big topic.
A lot we've covered.
Different issues and challenges to be tackled throughout the last 18 months and months ahead as well. But I think there are a couple of really solid takeaways from this conversation, and especially from your practices as as coffee importers. And I, for my part, can only say thank you so much for being such a great partner and really living by your words and practicing what you preach. That proves so invaluable in a situation like that. I can only really say that I'm grateful to you, and I'm
Thank
really
you.
happy to work with you.
It's a very nice compliment. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time, Maarten. And
Thank you.
who knows, you guys will most likely be a steady guest in in my coffee chat if you're happy with it. You're just
We're
always
happy
a
to
good
be.
source of information for all of it.
I hope next time we talk, there won't be any pandemics and logistical nightmares, and that we're well on track with climate change adaptation. So yeah,
Yeah, that'd be great.
would be good.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And speak to you soon.
Speak to you
Bye.
soon.
Thanks
Bye bye.
everyone for
Thank you.
listening as well.
Thank you.
Bye.